Okay, so welcome to day 10 of Vlogmas. This is Aaronica from Aaronica Be Cool and Co. And we are doing the countdown to Christmas with 24 days of crafty creativity and fun. So today we're going to be doing a reversible apron. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so this apron is a super easy, very doable pattern. You don't need anything special. So what you are going to need is two fabrics. And for each of those fabrics, you're going to need about a half of a yard. We are going to be following or using pattern pieces today. This is something that you can absolutely do without pattern pieces, but we are going to be utilizing the pattern pieces that are from Made for Mermaids. And this year we released this freebie and I made it reversible. Okay. So the way that I did make it reversible was by enclosing my seams in at the bottom, and I show you exactly how to do that in this here sew along. So in addition to, of course, your two fabrics, you're going to also need to use your sewing machine, have your needles, threads, and that is about it. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's take a look at the pattern pieces that we have for this here apron that we're doing. We're making an adjustable apron, meaning that there is not going to be just like one size. So we have here, these are the two loops that are going to help make it adjustable. Then of course we actually have two pieces of fabric representing the straps, one for each side. Then we've got our main fabrics. So we have, and I'm making mine reversible. So this is actually a fabric that I designed. It's up for sale on Spoonflower. I will make sure I put the link in the comments. So we have this one. And then I also decided to go ahead and do my other side in a denim scrap that I found from Second Stitch. And I feel like this matches wonderfully. Now, the only thing that I have done differently is I have added pockets because y'all, we cannot have an apron without pockets. So I am putting pockets on both sides because, again, I want this to be reversible. Why do I want this to be reversible? Because I want my husband to feel like wearing it as well while he cooks. So let's take a look at what we're going to be doing as far as putting together this apron. So these are going to be some high-level instructions. The first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to be folding in half these here loops. So we'll be folding them in half and using a 1/4 inch seam allowance to go ahead and just simply stitch these straight down. Alternatively, if you're like, hey, I don't ever feel like turning them out, you can always turn this into kind of like a bias style, like little loop situation like that. I'm just going to fold them in half and stitch. Then we're going to also be folding our straps in half as well. Folding it in half and using that 1/4 inch seam allowance to go ahead and stitch that straight down as well. Once we have finished with those, then it's going to come time for us to move along to our main pieces. I'm going to start out by putting together my pockets first. So the way that I'm going to do that is around each of my pocket, I'm going to press them under and I'm going to create a memory hem all the way around each of these here pocket, all the way around this here rectangle. And so the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to do a fold over twice. So I'm going to do 1/4 inch and then another 1/4 inch in half. And then for the top piece, I will go ahead and stitch that straight. But then for the rest of this, I will be also doing that fold over twice, 1/4 inch all the way around. And then that will be put on top of the apron. And I am going to go ahead and just put the matching pieces, or the matching pockets with the side of the apron that it corresponds with. Okay. So those are the first steps. So let's go ahead and to make today's apron. I'll be using this B77, which works wonderfully. And I am very, very geeked about using it. So let's go ahead and get started. I do need to wind a bobbin because my bobbin is empty. This is not a project that you necessarily have to use matching threads for those who have sewn with me before. Y'all already know I don't necessarily always like for my threads to match. So instead of winding a bobbin that I don't actually have, I'm just going to go ahead and pop this white into the bottom piece of my bobbin because I would have lost bobbin chicken. Look at that. So I'm going to just put that black on in there until it's time to use it again. And then we're going to just go ahead, pop our bobbin on in and begin this apron. I'm really excited about this apron because, you guys, for some odd reason, I just don't have any aprons. And I'm not exactly sure why. Like, it's not like even a thing of, oh, she hates aprons or, oh, she doesn't think that she needs aprons, because that is not it. I get messy when I sew, when I cook, so I don't even understand why I don't have one. To create this project, I am just using a standard straight stitch. I am also making sure that I use a stitch length of 2.5. We don't need to do anything special. And again, we're doing this at that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And part of me kind of likes the way that this like rougher edge looks, so I might not turn it right side out. We'll see. So we've got that one piece done. We're gonna do the second piece as well. Okay, so we've got those loops done. Now we're gonna go ahead and do our main pieces as well, which by main piece, I do mean the actual straps. And again, just folding that in half and keeping it cute with that 1/4 inch seam allowance as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and do these, and then we will turn them right side out before we move on to the next step. Now, to make this easier to turn the right sides out, I am going to go ahead and use my pinking shears to trim this down, aka grade the seam allowance, so that we do not have all of this extra fabric, because you guys, that is going to make it super hard to turn, and we don't need anything that is like super hard, you know what I mean? So I'm going to finish snipping this before we flip these right side out. Okay, so we did go ahead and turn those out. Here's what I will say. If you are like, hey girl, that is just not for me, I don't believe that I can turn these very small things. You can also, instead of using fabric, you can also use some twill like ribbon that will allow you to essentially get the same kind of effect as opposed to actually making your own straps. Using twill is absolutely fine. So I'm going to go ahead and press these out because if we're being honest, they look trash right now. But you know, a good press is going to be everything's saving grace. I'm using the Oliso Tulip Pink Edition iron today, and I love it. Sometimes I do feel like I need to break out like the big gun and use a bigger iron. Today, I don't feel like it. Today, we're feeling like we love this little mini Oliso, especially because I don't feel like I use my minis as much as I used to. Okay, so we've got one press. Now, once we do this, and once we finish pressing out our straps, we're going to go ahead, and then we're going to go ahead and press out and prep our pocket pieces. So let's get ready to do that. If you are someone who likes to make sure that your seams or whenever you're doing your pressing are exact, I do highly suggest getting this Dress Easy seam, easy hem rather, because it'll help you to make sure that you're doing exactly everything that you want to. So like on the back, when you hit this area right here, that's going to be that 1/4 inch. Then we've got the half, 5/8, and then of course it continues to go up from there. So if you are someone who likes to make sure that you're exact, go ahead and get one of those. For me, y'all should already know this about me. I'm over YOLO sewist. So I'm just going to do some fingertip measurements here. And we're going to press this before we pop this into the sewing machine to put together our first little hem situation. So I do think I'm going to, I feel like I did not do the greatest job with making sure that this was even. This was a scrap of fabric that I had. But guys, I'm like, wow, I could not cut this evenly to save my life. So we're just going to go ahead and even this out. It'll be fine. Okay, so now that we've gotten that evened out a little bit more, so we're going to go ahead and again, just as a reminder, we're pressing this over twice, just to make sure that there is no fraying that happens in our pocket piece, because nobody is trying to reach their hands into their pockets and pull out, you know, some frayed pieces. So we got that, and then we're going to just double it over like so before we go ahead and edge stitch this in place. Now, if you're like, Aaronica, why are we doing an edge stitch versus any other kind of stitch? The edge stitch is going to make sure that we are right at that edge of the fabric, which is exactly what I would like. So I'm going to go now just so you can see how that edge stitch looks. As you can see, we got right up close on that edge and it looks absolutely beautiful. In truth, I do feel like I could use this on the outside if I wanted to. This is the main fabric side. So I do have choices, especially because it looks like I've got some stains that happens here. Again, this is a scrap piece of fabric. So we might actually just opt to go for this being on the outside. So I'm going to continue to do my pressing all the way around before we go ahead and pin it in place. Okay, so I have finished pressing everything and doing my stitches. So now it's time for us to go ahead and place our pockets. I'm going to be lining the pocket up with this edge essentially. And so I'm going to find the middle of my actual apron and then we're going to pin it there. So I think I'm actually going to decide to go 2 inches down from this underarm, this area right here. So that's what we're going to, so now we're going to go ahead and just fold this in half and we're going to be doing this twice, obviously, for both sides. I think I lost, oh, did lose one of my little things there. So we're going to fold it in half. I'm actually going to fold it in half with my wrong sides together just so that it's easier for me to see. And then I'm going to mark this. Okay, so now that I folded that in half. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and use a marking tool. I like to use, as far as my marking tools go, I prefer to use just some pens, the erasable pens. So I'm going to pull one out. And then I do still have my ruler over here so that way I can make sure that I do measure down from this 2 inches that I wanted to. So that's going to be at about this point right here. So I'm putting my marking there. So now I'm going to also fold this in half so that I can also find my halfway point here so that I know where I'm lining that up to. Now that I've made my marking, let's go ahead, open this apron up. Now you guys know that using pins are really not my jam, but we're obviously going to use them today, baby. So I'm going to line this marking up just like that. And so now we're going to go ahead and just pin this into place before we sew just straight around this perimeter area, because I do like to have some, I do like to have a little divider just in case, right? I am going to actually go ahead and as I'm stitching, I'm also going to do a stitch down this middle area. The way that I pin, I like to start out with the 4 corners. Ouch, Jesus. That's the reason why I don't like to use pins. I always end up pinning myself. Okay. And then I am going to put one down this middle area as well. So now I'm going to do this with the cheetah print side as well before we go ahead and take this to the machine to go top stitch in place. When I top stitch in place, I am going to be using a seam allowance, I mean not a seam allowance, but a stitch length of 3 because we are not constructing. It's not necessary that I go ahead and actually do the 2.5, which is what we use for construction. So again, I've got my next piece out that I need to go ahead and mark. And so what I like to do is I like to line up my kind of like my points of reference on my my cutting mat in a certain area, because it just makes it that much easier for me. Okay, so I marked that. And then we've got our pocket piece here. And of course, we are putting pockets on both sides because like I said, again, I do want this to be completely reversible. And everybody knows that you need pockets. Like, dresses are not the only things that we get excited about pockets for. What is the point in having clothing if we cannot put pockets on everything to hold things? So that is how I feel about that. Excuse me. I am still a little sick, battling a little cold. What I am going to also do for this apron, and I'm thinking about doing it, I'm not 100% certain if it's going to happen, but I'm thinking about adding a couple of buttons on here so that way I can actually button on my like my dish towels so that they're in my hands and I can use those to wipe my hands, versus having to, like, I'm one of those people who I'm like constantly searching around my kitchen for things. And so instead of having to do that, I'll be able to button those dish towels into place. I got this idea because I was teaching a class over the weekend and I was talking about making aprons. And Christine gave me this idea because she said she had so many vintage aprons that had like the dish towel spot on them. And I just feel like that's a genius, right? Because we know that we're going to need those dish towels. So let's just go ahead and make a spot for them on there. And then I'm also going to be putting one pin, of course, down the middle again. There we go. So that way, one, of course, it marks the center spot, but also it just makes it so that even as I'm removing the pins, as I'm sewing, I know that the pocket is still held in place. So now we're going to go ahead and top stitch around both this one as well as the plain denim one before we begin to attach everything else. Okay, so now that we've done all of the details, or should I say the extra details, right? Now it's time for us to go ahead and put this baby together. So we're going to go ahead and lay out one of our fabrics. And we have, I keep losing pieces, I'm not gonna lie. I hope that you guys have better organization about your pieces than I do, because I have definitely completely lost one of my loops. So I'm gonna have to make another loop. But we're gonna go ahead and attach, and I'm gonna use this here white area as my attachment so that way it's even on either side. So we're gonna go ahead and attach that together. I am going to, let's see, I'm going to choose to put it like this. And then we're going to move it in 1/2 inch so that way when we do our seam allowance, which is 1/2 inch, it will pull out right at the right area. And so I'm going to go ahead, clip this in place. And then for our loops, assuming that you have not lost one of your loops the way that I have, we're going to be putting our loops on this side or in this area of our pattern pieces. Yeah, oh, look at that. I found the leather loop. Praises. So we're going to put this loop, and it's going to be facing the inside just like this. We're going to put our loop 1/2 inch down on either side. So we have that one there. And then we are going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Now, at this point in time, you are welcome to go ahead and base this in place. If you are a YOLO sewist like yours truly, you already know that's not what we're going to do. We're just going to pop this other one on top. Here we go. I'm so happy I found that other one. It wasn't hard to make, but it was not something I enjoyed. So now we're just going to put the right side of our next piece on top of this. Now we're going to be sewing around the entire perimeter of this apron. So we're going to be going from the bottom, and I like to start essentially where I'm going to finish. And so I'm going to be leaving open about 3 inches on this bottom because we're going to end up top stitching that in place. But I'm going to sew around the entire perimeter of this here apron with everything inside. And again, I'm going to be leaving open about 3 inches on this bottom. And if you are someone who needs to mark things, definitely mark maybe about 5 inches because this bottom is pretty big. So I'm going to go ahead and do that sewing. Again, we're having a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So let's go ahead and make that. Okay, so we have completed that. What we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and just trim our edges, aka our corners. And we're going to be trimming to the stitch line for each of our corners. So if there's a corner, we're trimming it. You do not have to use pinking shears for this. You can use regular scissors. I just had pinking shears because they were out at my desk. And we're trimming this down so that those corners are nice and crispy. I am going to take down the top a little bit as well. But then we're going to go ahead and pull our right sides out. And then we're going to top stitch the entire bottom piece of this, and then we will be finished and it will be completely enclosed. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull that through. And so I left a little, I probably left at that 3 inches. And I'm just going to use my straps to pull it on through. And I thought that the 3 inches was going to be fine because, granted, it does feel like it's a lot of material, but I don't know. It felt like it was going to be fine. So, pulling this through. Important to note is that as you are sewing, make sure that you're going over and reverse stitching over those areas that have a lot of tension. So I did that, of course, over my strap piece as well as my loops. And that will just make it so that as you're tying your apron tight, it'll just reinforce that. So now we've got that completely pulled through. I'm going to go ahead, put up my ironing mat. And y'all, I do need a new ironing mat. This is exactly what I should probably ask for Christmas, but we'll see. So now we're just going to go ahead and I want to essentially press this so that way, when it comes time for me making my top stitch, it's easy breezy, okay? Because I am going to be top stitching all the way across this area, all the way across this bottom. And so when we press that in place, it just makes it that much easier to do. And if you're having an issue with your, the bottom pieces lining up, you can always flip it back, right side back inside to kind of make it a little bit easier and press your seams flat or trim them a little bit lower. Both of those will make it a lot easier. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and put one more stitch just along this bottom, and I will show you what. And just like that, we've got our apron. So this is obviously the side that I feel like will be worn by me the most, but let's go ahead and flip this baby around so that you can see what it looks like on the other side, because keep in mind, again, we did go ahead and put in our pockets. So let's see what it looks like wearing it on the other side. Okay, so I know I made this side with my husband in mind, but you guys, honestly, I really love this side so much. Yeah, this was super easy breezy, and I hope that you guys made it and you fell in love with it as well as have decided to make either doing some fun things like gifting them, or maybe adding some embroidery, like maybe best chef on the top front or something along those lines. But either way, I hope that this is something that you found very useful for this holiday season. And with that, that concludes today's video. I can't wait to see you back tomorrow for tomorrow's content. And with that, of course, stay merry, stay bright, and happy sewing.